A lot of the questions that are asked in group and private meetings find their way into a talk. So let me just say what I forgot to mention at the beginning. If there's ever something you wish to bring up with me that you do not want to appear in a talk, and of course I do not mention names in talks, who said what, but if that is the case, you don't want that at all discussed in public, please let me know about this and it will not happen. Also, I do not write down or remember questions verbatim. The fact that a question in its formulation may undergo a transformation is not due to the fact that I don't listen or haven't listened to you. But maybe this formulation is more suitable for looking at it, all of us, generally. Or else several similar questions have merged into one. Here's a question that started a group meeting yesterday. Is there any learning, let's put it, do we learn without thinking? Is it possible to learn without thinking? Meaning, if there is some insight, seeing something directly, which is not the operation of thought. Direct seeing is not thinking about something. It's seeing, hearing the birds, feeling the movements of the body, the breathing, and sound of airplane motor. Even though words are used to describe this, it's not, the awareness is not there because of thinking of the airplane. The awareness is there and then the word, the airplane. So the question, is learning inevitably connected with thinking and with accumulation? Accumulating knowledge. Now, the discussion at times seemed to get very abstract, and I want to avoid that here. Somebody may already have decided, my God, why does she bring this up? I'm not interested in this. I want to know, why do we suffer? Or what is anger? So let's see whether we can tie this in very concretely to our moment-to-moment experiencing. In listening right now, this moment, the calling of a bird, a rumbling of a motor, breathing, very gentle sound of wind in trees, is there a separation between me, the listener, and what is heard? Either there is a feeling of separation or there isn't. Most of the time it seems that there is a separate listener, looker, doer. But then there are moments in which all separation ceases. There's just bird calling and rumbling and breathing and winding and insects buzzing. All happening in an open awareness. And then, so the question at the group asked, and then thought comes in and says, have I learned something? Or what have you learned? This is the programmed function of thought, to question ourselves. What are we learning? Or the urge to put into intelligent and intelligible language what has just been experienced. And there's nothing wrong with that. If there's the direct, unshakable insight that there is no separate observer, there's just buzzing of fly and chirping of birds, then thought can say, this has been learned, that there is no separation in quiet attending. And maybe the urge to communicate that to others who may have hear this for the first time, either reject it or wonder about it, whether it could be true or argue with it. So, yes, indeed, there can be learning in looking and directly attending, directly seeing, listening, which needs no words. The words that are spoken to explain it do not disturb that field of attending quietly, openly, undividedly. And yet thought may say, this is what I have learned by attending quietly, that there is no division. Now, do I carry it around with me? Let's test it out. At a moment that there is no attention, just to say there's no division when there is undivided attention, isn't much help, is it? It's just knowledge, accumulated knowledge. Or does the remembrance of an incident in which there was no division bring that about again? Does it? One has to see. One cannot condemn anything or reject anything, but we can look, we can test. Maybe at the moment of feeling divided and the remembrance of an undivided moment arises, maybe at that moment of remembrance, there's already attention. And the remembering is the direct listening again. Very, very quick and very hard to say what comes first. And yet just to talk with each other about undivided attention and the absence of a separate observer, and throwing into the discussion all that we have read or remember from past experiences without really being here, is just accumulated knowledge being shared. And just knowing about this, even though knowing about it very clearly, does not mean that the clarity of undivided listening is here right now while we're discussing it in clear words. Well, while sitting here before the talk, a thought occurred of this time at lunch, after lunch, in walking the creekside trail, I'll take red ribbon along to renew some of the faded ribbons on the trees. Thought occurred. And instantly, with that thought, there was a felt energy, which is amazing. You think about doing something, or the thought occurs about doing something, which is has been seen to be necessary, and the body already supplies the energy to get up, get the ribbon, and walk on the creekside trail. Chemicals are aroused, energy is mobilized. That was felt very clearly. And now I'm talking about it. So, does one learn through direct observation in awareness that a thought triggers energy throughout the body? The energy to up and go or to get angry? That can be experimented with by each one of us. Evoke an incident for the sake of experimentation, of something that really got to you, annoyed you or angered you recently, or maybe 5 years ago. Maybe today or yesterday. And see what happens. Do the chemicals start moving, mobilizing symptoms that we call anger in the body, wanting to go out and give this person a piece of my mind, or talk to somebody else about what she did or how he treated me? One can observe it. That a thought, a remembrance, triggers a state of being. It doesn't have to be the quote-unquote real situation. The thought can substitute for that. And watching again, maybe, in looking at this incident, which even just yesterday got me all upset, agitated, and evoking it right now, one may find no emotion is triggered. Does thought come in and say, what am I learning from this? And can thought formulate it in saying, when there is attention, the energy of awareness, maybe a thought does not trigger an emotional reaction. When the attention is weak or partial or non-existent, a thought triggers emotional reaction. I mean now a thought of an angry incident or something scary or sad or pleasurable. So the insight into what happens needs very little or no thought. But thought wants to clarify it intellectually, which is its function, is very helpful. All these talks are made up of lots of thoughts and words. And may or may not help in seeing something directly. That has to happen for each one of us directly. Whereby if there is no direct insight, a clear way of thinking can masquerade for seeing directly. I do remember many years ago reading and thinking clearly about things that I was reading about. I thought I saw it directly. It needs direct insight to see what is thought and what is immediacy. And yet, reading about things, hearing things expressed clearly, intelligently, may have some function in paying attention, maybe arousing the interest. One sees oneself in the description and realizes how one has suffered from this whole thing we talk about all the time, the storyline, the story about my suffering, my ill fate, my hardships, my losses. And getting so moved and riled up by the story, not even by the event itself. The event is long past, but the story keeps it alive. If I hear about that, somebody says that, maybe it's easier to watch it. Next time, I become the victim of my story and suffer from the story with its potential of arousing emotions and sentiments and pains or pleasures. Anyone would like to inquire further into this or go over it again or express their view on it? That's what meetings are for. Another thing that was brought up, which may be of general concern, somebody saying, I really feel very attracted in a life of continued awareness. I really would love to live this way. And yet there's a fear at the same time that this may require of me to give up, to renounce what I love doing most, in this case, art, writing poetry, and whatever else. And the fear was partially triggered through something I said in a previous talk. I made some remark about imagination tinting perception. If I imagine what a tree is like, I don't need to look at it. I know what a tree looks like. It is there in the imagination. And all of us know incidents like that. Right now what comes up as an example, many, many years ago, was at a friend's house. And the salt shaker, the salt was not a salt shaker, it was a little container which had salt in it, and a little tiny spoon, had been passed back and forth. It was near me, and my friend said, would you please pass the salt container? And I picked it up and happened to take a look. I was utterly amazed. It wasn't what I thought a salt container was. It happened to be a tiny little dish, intricately inlaid with colored pieces of glass. hadn't seen it before, because thought and image had known what a salt container looks like. It's convenient. It's easier for us, it seems, to go by what we know. And yet so amazing and refreshing when we take a second look, a fresh look. So this is what, in case I had caused confusion in other people's minds about imagination, I was not condemning creative imagination. How could I? I don't look at things and view things this way and think of them this way. We're here to examine what goes on in the human mind. We're not here to condemn or renounce, get rid of. But yet we're so conditioned that this is what we ought to be doing because it's happened around us since day one we were born, that we also hear others talk that way, even though they don't talk this way. We still hear it that way. It always amazes me when people tell me, you said yesterday we shouldn't think, or but that's how we hear, unless there's some freedom to listen freshly, to be aware of this deep program, to hear in terms of our categories of shoulds and shouldn'ts, good and bad. Something is talked about with great emphasis or passion by me. The listener may, or the listener's brain may already have noted that the opposite of what she says is bad, because what she says here she seems to think is good. So, talking about it, pondering over it, listening to it, we may realize that our listening is not pure, and be more watchful of the categories, do and don't, right and wrong, good and bad, that shape what we hear. So back to the questioner. Would a life of awareness attending mean I would have to give up art? Where one has to look, where does the question come from? Out of a moment of attentive living, or imagining and fearing, speculating about the future, and worrying about my love, that I may lose it. That's where our apprehensions come from most of the time, don't they? We imagine that we may have to lose something, give something up, be without, be stripped. Sometimes people express it as, I be stripped of our humanness, foibles, weaknesses, passions. So why not find out for oneself? Or do we feel a resistance? I don't want to touch this thing unless I get a guarantee how it's going to be. Of course, that's impossible. It is totally, it doesn't go with attending. Guarantees don't go with attention. Attention exposes our insecurities and clinging to guarantees. or at least wanting them to feel more secure. It's exposed in a moment of awareness, which doesn't judge. Awareness doesn't say this is good or bad. It needs thought, conditioned thought, to come in and express that. So what is art? What is artful living? I don't know what the right word would be, but I'm looking for artistic living, or the art of living. Because what came to mind in talking to that particular person was the magnificent poetry and brush paintings of Zen masters, expressing so sparsely, so right on, what is revealed in direct seeing. The beauty of that. The eloquence of it. The eloquence of a few brush strokes. Or a few lines of poetry. Yesterday in that group meeting, someone was quoting a haiku. I can't quite remember the proper words, but the essence of it was, now that I am lost, I can enjoy the view. That fits, doesn't it? Now that I'm lost, I can enjoy the view and even put it into good words, which may be enjoyable to someone else, not just enjoyable, but ring a bell. I once saw many years ago, a most wonderful television program. It was a series of 6 in which a Japanese sumi master, this is the black ink brush stroke, was demonstrating 6 different topics to his students there, how to go about doing a flower, a fish, a human being, a branch of pine with a pine cone on it. And what utterly amazed me was how well this man knew what a fish looks like, what this particular pine cone looked on this particular branch of this particular pine. It was not an imagination like we have on our Christmas cards. It was well observed and yet expressed so, I don't find words, so eloquently. He also, the last lesson was landscape. I forget all the principles involved. It was so beautiful. I have to reconstruct it. He said a good landscape is made up out of heaven and earth. So for heaven he had a towering mountain and earth, rocks and some water. And then he says, and here is accessory, and there was a little tiny human being. So, I know there are many people who are concerned with this question. It has often been the topic of inquiry together. Is it all right to perform, to write books, poetry, to read, sing, play music? Again, whom is one asking and whence the question? To look at it freely, honestly. One person once in watching Torval and Dean in their masterful performance that won them I don't know how many gold medals, the Olympics. This person said, I just wish I could dance skate like that. All the applause, all this audience, so totally enraptured. I was beside myself, said this person, in watching it. And very honest. Does one want to dance to have this enraptured audience? And not to kid oneself, no, I'm not into the audience. I just want to dance for the sake of dancing. To be honest, to watch it. Needing to be known, to be famous, to feel good about oneself, accomplishments, recognition. And is that all? If that was not there, would something survive? Would there still be a need to express what is seen or felt very directly, immediately? No matter whether it arrives at someone else's place or not. And that one can watch it as creation takes place. Does the motive blot out everything? Just the thought of motive, then there's not a complete moment of creation. There's an eye out for the results. Not just an eye, the body clamors or hankers for recognition, being loved, approved, and so forth. Or can that habitual thing which inhabits the human being be seen as it arises and dissipate in the seeing, so it does not impose, detract, or distort? And that it does impose, detract, and distort can also be seen, sometimes just in retrospect. Because if that takes over, the attention and the awareness is gone. And then after one, there's a realization what the motives were and that it put an end to a moment of creativeness. It's the wrong question anyways to say, do I have to give up? Because awareness, if it is full, complete, reveals that there is no I. That has to do anything. Things happen on their own. And maybe, who knows, the desire to write poetry or do music may go, may disappear. One may not even know. I've noticed at one point so dependent on it. Music, I remember. I thought if this was ever taken from me, I wouldn't exist anymore. Certainly anybody I married would have to be just as much of a music enthusiast as I was, which didn't turn out to be the case. Our son, when he was little, I would do some singing or put a record on. He said, I don't like your music. He liked the Beatles, so I switched. I liked them too, after a while. And now I forget. Kyle is now the one who likes to turn on some music, and it bothers me when we're talking or eating or the birds are singing. Why music? It's all there. It has to be a very special occasion to really be with the music when nothing else is going on. But I'm not imposing this on anyone. I hope not. This is where authority, I hope, does not come in. is each for himself, herself. What we need to do at the moment, or what leaves, goes by itself. With no renunciation at work. I don't know what that is. It's thought, isn't it? Thought and the compulsion that goes with this kind of thought to attain a goal which is also imagined. This just occurred, and I want to say it. In listening like this so quietly, so openly, could one say that all is sacred music? We will end here for today.